Woo! Julia says, woo! My voice is crotonic, so bear with us today, everybody. But Wet Hog is on from Annapolis. Haven't seen Wet Hog in a long time. Saying, hello, old friends. Hope all is well. Christopher Gillingham sent me a nice some photos of their last sale a week or so ago in the Solent. Breezy night it was. Christopher and Jane Gillingham. And lots of others are on tier. DeYoung, Jeff Ogle, Ted Ryman, Alistair Murray up and early in Melbourne, rather. Oh, man, my voice is bad.
Greetings from my tongue. And Ed Worley says hello to everyone.
Graham Sweeney, John Emmett, Stingray, Fritz Mueller, as we're going to get this one across the starting line.
And Andrew Pinard.
Yeah, I see Pindar. He's been in Longboat Key. That's on the west side of Florida. I've spent some time there myself over the years. And he's having his annual week there. Julia, I trust you are well.
Oh, not at all.
You're not? You sound better than I.
I am better than you.
Man, I am crotonic. I've had this cold or voice thing for a better part of a week now. So bear with us. We really wanted to do this show today since we didn't do it on Friday, and we're not going to be able to do one this coming Friday. So welcome everybody to show number 660.
Yeah, it's a great number.
Tuesday, the 7th of November, 23. I've poured all sorts of Dayquil and cough drops and everything down my throat, and somehow Julia will survive this.
We will.
Let's have a rendition of I Was Born Under a Wandering Star, Graham Sweeney. Paul Callahan checking in. Nice to see you, Paul. Yeah, and I haven't, people say I've been partying. No, I think I have not had a thing to drink in probably 5 days. Maybe that, Julia, is the problem.
It probably is.
It is. But welcome, everybody, to our show number 660. We're delighted to have Hamish Ross with us, who is standing by down in Auckland, the esteemed AC history, deed, and rules guru, and also historian of the sport beyond the America's Cup. So we're delighted to have Hamish with us. Julia, talking with him briefly during the tech check.
Yes.
It's nice to have him here. If you will support us, please, via Patreon. More and more of you are doing that. We appreciate that. Patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated, and give us $1 or $2 or $5 a month, or even more. Some people do. While we were away in this country, at least, we fell back. Finally, you've already all had your changes to summertime or daylight savings time or winter time in Europe, and we fell back this past weekend. I do not like this, as you all know. I don't care if we stay on daylight time or stay on summertime or
That's
standard
probably where your
time.
voice went.
No, it went well before that. It went middle of last week. But, man, I hate it when the clocks change, they say there. That and several other memes of that nature were sent through. This one came from Martha Peterson, spring forward, fall back. Why the heck are we still doing this? Indeed. And the cutest one, the nicest one, I think. There's some dirty ones too, but I only use clean ones, as you know. Explain it again. It feels like 5 p.m. dinner time, but it's really 4 p.m. This is bull, Shiza. And that came from Joe Holtzman. Thank you, Joe, for this. Julia, what day is it? What cup is being run today or yesterday? Hamish probably knows. I'll bring Hamish's mic up because I'm sure he knows. Hamo?
Yeah, it's a big thing in New Zealand as well, actually.
Is it? Why in New Zealand?
Well, it's just traditional. It's probably the biggest racing event, horse racing event in the Southern Hemisphere, or it definitely is. Traditionally, New Zealanders flutter on the cup, and a lot of sweepstakes are held in businesses and socially, and basically the country almost comes to a stop at basically 5 p.m. our time to watch the cup being run.
Well, finally, after John Mangino said breeders now Rick Manero, the Grand National. No, Ted Ryman got it. Ted, of course, the Brit living in Cape Town, and he said it's the Melbourne Cup, and that was run today on the 7th. Of course, it's the 8th down there now. But I think we've covered this before as a noted feature of this particular day.
Mm-hmm.
Nice pictures in The Guardian and other publications. Australia's Melbourne Cup Day held the first Tuesday in November at, is it Flemington?
Yes, it's Flemington.
Flemington Racecourse. Can you read that, Hamish?
I can.
Why don't you read it? You and Julie have got to co-host this show since I'm so croutonic.
Australia's Melbourne Cup Day held the first Tuesday in November at Flemington Racecourse in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Is 7 November this year. It's a state holiday. Most schools and businesses shut down to let everybody take part. About 100,000 people flocked to Flemington. The 3,200 metre turf race is televised live to about 650 million people around the world. Cup Day, as it's popularly known, is the biggest horse racing event in Australia, home to more racecourses than any other country in the world. The day is part of the week-long Melbourne Cup Carnival of festivities and fashion.
Did you know that, Julie, that there's all these racetracks in Australia?
No, I was just about to say, I have no idea.
Well,
I've never been to a racetrack.
All the times you've been to Australia,
No.
and you've never been to a racetrack. That's like
No.
saying you go to Spain and you don't go see a bull. Hamish, when we were living in Spain, did you go to a bullfight there in the Valencia bull ring?
No, I didn't. But interesting enough, a small town where we both lived, called Puthol, had a running of the bulls, I think, locally, and certainly my family went along and watched it. I think you and I are too busy at the time.
Well, that's dangerous. The running of the bulls in Pamplona, isn't that where the big one is, the annual one?
Yes.
Somebody got gored again this year in that croutonicism. Wow, that's a 2-mile race. Wow, Steve Gruber's saying, I never heard that. Mangino said it sounds so much more authentic when Hamish reads it.
Oh, it does.
Exactly, with his down under accent. Mangino's saying it's a beautiful track. And Clayton Embley saying the Breeders' Cup is the World Championships and is run in the U.S. But so a little bit more about this day yesterday in Melbourne.
Melbourne Cup. The race finished just a few moments ago. Here are the final stages.
Plenty of hopes around the corner into the straight in the Lexus Melbourne Cup, and here's Vauban on the outside of Future History and Bow and Declare between them. Absurd is also chiming in. 400 metres to go. It's Absurd moving up on the outside for Zach Purden. A length in front, but without a fight, is running on right down the centre of the track. Without a fight up to Absurd, Bow and Declare, and Shiraz the bolter. It's without a fight. 100 metres to go. 2 or 3 lengths in front, coming away from Shiraz and also Solcombe. Without a fight, Mark Zara, a Melbourne Cup champion, wins it by 2 lengths.
That's what you call emerging from the pack in that one. And this is the jockey. Now, this is not a Central or South American jockey. This guy is an Australian. His name is, Hamish, you know?
Yeah, Mark Zara. He's and he wasn't giving the fingers to everybody. He was just signaling that he had won 2 races, a two-peat.
That's exactly right, a two-peat.
Mm-hmm.
He'd won a two-peat, so that's a big deal. And bravo Zulu to him, and a nice way, I think, to celebrate today, even though it's the 8th down under. Now, any other comments on all that? Certainly was without a fight. Yeah, that's true. Play on words. David James, Darwin would have approved of the running of the bull.
Yes, let's get rid of the shallow end of the gene pool.
Dr. Hamish Ross is our guest. You all know him. I think Clark Chapin tell us the last time he was on, Julie, was early in January.
Yeah, I think it was, he said January 2nd.
And you were at your batch, Hamish, out enjoying your holiday break.
It was the summer that wasn't. We're all looking forward to a nice, warm, traditional summer. And we seem to have sort of missed a summer last year. People put it down to all sorts of causes, including the Tongan volcano exploding before. But anyway, we're fingers crossed and heading towards summer as you guys are tucking down for fall, I guess.
We are indeed. And I want to say thanks to everybody, first to Ashley Householder, who was with us on Tuesday show last week, and then I intended to do a show Friday, and there were technical problems down at Newport Beach that prevented that. But Ashley was a great guest on Tuesday. She's the executive director of the Sailing Museum and the National Sailing Hall of Fame. We were trying to get Gary Jobson and Andy Rose on the show on Friday from Newport Beach. But at the time, this is a shot from about an hour before we were to go to air. I was set up technically there at the tech table, but the rest of the tent and the internet connection and a few other things and the backdrop wasn't delivered. So we had a lot to do before we got busy that evening for the cocktail party that kicked off the National Sailing Hall of Fame celebration. So I thought discretion was the better, what's this expression?
Better part of valor.
Better part of valor. Thank you, Julia. You're going to have to talk. You and Hamish are going to have to carry this show.
All right.
And so I can just thank you, Hamish, for reading that opening segment about the Melbourne Cup. But we did have a great time down there. Cocktail party on Friday night, the formal induction Saturday morning, and then a gala dinner at Newport Harbor Yacht Club. We went over to the other club on Saturday night. The really nice affair. The kind of not necessarily the who's who, but it's yacht club and sailing, yacht racing royalty in this country. A lot of people turned out. Peter Harkin, Peter Eisler, lots and lots of people to come see their friends who were being inducted into the Hall of Fame. A lot of former inductees like Bob Johnstone, J-Boat's fame. And it was just a terrific event co-hosted by Balboa Yacht Club and Newport Harbor Yacht Club. This was later Friday afternoon when we finally got things all wired together. And just before the cocktail party started at Balboa Yacht Club, just to give you a feel for how it all looked and felt. Okay, half an hour before the VIP cocktail party starts at 5:30, and the reception table is all set up. Christine Gribben, the co-chair with Dion Ficker McDonald's here, and some staff from Newport, Rhode Island, from the National Sailing Hall of Fame. Welcome. They're all set to go. The beautiful night here. No breeze at all. People starting to gather here. Club's laid on poo-poos. Quite a nice selection here. And a couple of ice sculptures. Look at this. A couple of beautiful ice sculptures that have been laid on by John Miller, the executive chef. John, thank you for all your fine. We had a nice meal. And Brian Marshall's been all the time. He's at once my boss and my helper, and he is really he's the head of the waterfront and the facilities manager. We work every year during GovCup, and here's the main tent where tomorrow the induction ceremony will take place. Our tech table there in the back with the Balboa Yacht Club flag, that's new. Shielded by the tent, official photographers, champagne and wine, and I'm not sure what else is being served down there. Russell Miller, the general manager, suited up. I better go put my clothes on. And here is the stage with the sip and repeat wall, nice looking wall. Tomorrow morning at 10, we won't have the sun shining through it. Both TVs are working nicely either side of the stage. Floral displays. Julia was concerned that there was no flowers on the tables. Not to worry, Julia. And it's all happening here. About a half an hour at the Balboa Yacht Club. And again tomorrow morning from 10 till noon is the formal induction. And we'll be over at Newport Harbor Yacht Club tomorrow night for the gala dinner. Ciao for now. So all the countries have something like this. All of your countries have some kind of a Hall of Fame and a Sailing Hall of Fame and an induction. Do you do that in New Zealand, once a year?
We don't really have a Hall of Fame as such in New Zealand for sailing. There'll be plenty of candidates for it, sure, but no, it's not something that's really been taken up. We've got a National Maritime Museum here in Auckland, and that celebrates everything from the early Polynesian voyages all the way through to recent America's Cup wins. So, so it's something, an idea for the future, perhaps.
And it's quite an attraction and promotion for the sport, I think. And one of the things we've been doing is live streaming it. We live streamed the induction on Saturday morning. both to their Facebook and YouTube channel, also to Sailing Illustrated's page from Balboa Yacht Club. And it was a very well attended. It was one of the biggest attendances they've had.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as the discussion is about, they're moving it around the country. Next year it will be in Chicago. It has been on both coasts. I think this was the third time it was on the West Coast over the last, it's been going on since 2011. I think that was the start. Good fun. Bravo Zulu to the inductees. Most of these names will be familiar to all of you around the world, not just the Americans on here, for the inductees for the class of 2023. And here's a nice video that Gary Jobson prepared introducing the inductees, all of whom were present, or at least their representatives if they were deceased. I said they were those were living, which is I think 7 of the 10 were there, and a lot of friends and family, obviously,
and great stories,
and it's a gathering of the clan, as somebody said. It's a gathering of the tribe, and again, Rolex supports this, as they do many of the cool things in our sport. We're bloody thankful to Rolex and Bravo Zulu to the class. The speeches were short, and for the most part, one or two went on a little long. And Gary only had to step in once and went in and tapped one of the guys on the shoulder and said, "Your 3 minutes is up," after he'd talked for about 13, maybe. But they were poignant. They were fun. Hamish, this is a big deal for people.
Yes.
Which is nice.
And you think about all the hours and time, and from 6 years old to 86.
Well, exactly.
They put in.
Exactly.
And it's the one time you can say, yeah, you really did it.
Hamish, how many of those 10 did you know?
I think all but probably 3 or 4. I've had the pleasure of working alongside several of them, and John Marshall particularly. I'm a great fan of John's. He's made a massive contribution not only to the Cup but to sailing in general. Also, Pete Homburg. He was with me on the Illingi team. A great respect for what Pete's achieved and his passion for Virgin Islands. I think it's great. And of course, the Honeys worked tirelessly in the San Francisco America's Cup, which I was involved with. So yeah, no, there's quite a few people there I recognise and applaud.
Yeah, as Alistair's saying, it's a great lineup, and this museum like most of these things, they have a selection committee of esteemed people, and they do a good job. And it was probably John Marshall gave the most poignant speech. You know, he's a very, very bright guy. He's been involved in the sport forever. He was president of North Sales. He was president of Hinckley Yachts, won the America's Cup, lost the America's Cup, won it back with DC. I went to battle, you know, he and I fought and won the 88 Cup, both onshore and off.
Mm.
And he's one of the brightest people along with, well, I'll tell you, the only person I know who's brighter than Stan Honey is Sally Honey.
Oh, yes.
And she, Julia,
And
you
she
know
is.
her well.
Oh,
and,
yes, indeed.
and she gave a fabulous talk,
She did.
as did John Marshall. So I just give you a couple. That the introduction ceremony was Saturday morning, and you can watch it in replay. Obviously, it's on the Sailing Illustrated Facebook page as well as on the National Sailing Hall of Fame YouTube and Facebook pages. And as I said, Sally probably gave the most fun, the lightest, the uplifting. She referenced a lot of different things. You know, she goes back. I first met her racing fireballs. A lot of you are fireball sailors, especially those of you in the UK. And I know Ryman and others of you raced fireballs over the years. And she was crewing for her then husband, Mark Lindsay, the late great Mark Lindsay, in a fireball when we were racing. I don't know.
What year is that?
50 years ago.
Yeah.
50 years ago. And they figured out that they'd be more competitive if Mark would go on the wire and she'd drive.
Yeah.
And she did.
Yes.
And you know what? they were even faster. They were
Yeah.
even better.
Yeah.
And of course, she and Stan have gone on to win any
Yes.
number of things, large, big boats and small 505s. And she gave a terrific talk as well. Very bright. Gary said that when he was president of U.S. Sailing, he'd asked her to chair a couple of these committees that looked into the tragedies.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned that the other day on the show. She's bright, analytical, and just a great person, a representative of our sport. John Marshall, also, as you mentioned, Hamish has been around. He gave a poignant, thoughtful, and Margarita Bottini was there with him, his wife, who's the is again my age. We've known her for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she was an Italian journalist and photographer of considerable repute, going
Yes,
back to
indeed.
the early days of the Cup in Newport. I say the early days for us. So Marshall gave a great talk, and it was good to see him again. And everybody's I think a lot of us haven't seen each other in a, as we would say in Michigan, in a coon's age.
I know.
In a coon's age. The other guy who gave a great talk, and I didn't know this guy. I've seen him. He writes in Sailing Magazine. He's a designer, and he's designed a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But he's Bob Perry, of course, and he's probably more famous for his column in Sailing Magazine, that large form magazine in this country, that he does a design review.
Yes.
And he's probably done more design reviews
Anybody.
than maybe not only anybody, but probably everybody else combined. He's been
Yes.
doing it for years and years and years, and pithy and funny. Well, the talk was hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
If you do nothing else, go back, watch the induction ceremony Saturday morning, find when Bob, it was alphabetical, so he was down near the end, and watch his hilarious acceptance speech. It was wonderful.
Hey, Tom, he'd be great for the show, wouldn't he?
We're working on that. We're working on that. And I tell you, another show we're going to do is, I sat at the gala dinner Saturday night with Bob Johnstone over, and I hadn't seen Bob for, we go way back. And he and Rod, the J boats and the J24 and so on. And Bob is now, he's got to be 80 something.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what he's sailing? Radio controlled yachts. He says the best thing, I can go yacht racing. I race 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
He's been sailing these, what do they call? Somebody will know, the DF95s. Is that the boat that U.S. Sailing used for Championship of Champions? And he knew I'd panned that on the show the other day, saying U.S. Sailing should have never used that class for the Championship of Champions. He said, yeah, probably it was not a great idea, but it wasn't a bad idea either. What we should all be doing. He said, if we were pushing the DF, I think it's the DF95, somebody help me out that knows that class. That's, I guess, the biggest class of radio-controlled yachts now. One design, not that expensive, $600, $700, $800, he said. He said, imagine if we pushed that, if U.S. Sailing and the rest of the world, your show, he said, pushed that and celebrated that, we'd get a lot more people sailing. on radio-controlled yachts and every little pond and every little river and every little everything.
Yeah.
Not quite bathtubs, but
He's got stock.
no, well, he doesn't. I don't think. I thought that at first, but I went back. I think he's just an enthusiast.
Yeah.
Having a good go, doing that now late in life rather than hanging his ass over the side of a boat.
I was impressed by him and maybe somebody else saying that it felt a lot like being at the helm of a real boat when you bring it.
I think now that's getting carried away. I think it's really quite a different art. I mean, it's more like flying a drone. It's like, it's different. But if Bob Johnstone is doing it and he's saying we could get a lot more people in the sport. Is that correct or Crutonic? I don't know.
Yeah, Ed Worley says the current crop of model radio control boats are very sophisticated. So
yeah. Well, if it would get people into the sport, I'm all for it. So I'm going to have Bob on too. Hamish, what do you think? Will that get people into the sport?
Oh, look, I think sailing's sailing. Sometimes everybody can't be on the water all day. Other times they may have infirmities, which they can keep them in the sport. So, hey, I'm all for participation and involvement, to be honest. And if it's one way we can involve people in the sport, then why not?
Yeah, and another point just on the Hall of Fame, Fritz Mueller down in Miami is making an awful lot of folk in the Sailing Hall of Fame at this point. It'll be 300 by 2030. Well, they're catching up. It's too bad they haven't been doing this for a century. But meanwhile, Fritz points out Manfred Curry and C.A. Marshaw are overlooked. Well, there's a whole lot of other people that are overlooked that that we can all name that should be in there. But I think what's David James saying? I bought DF-65s. Dragon Force is what DF stands for, right? Dragon Force 65s are both my boys, good junior sailors. It is nothing like a drone. Okay. David, thank you for that. For those wondering about the Draycote Water Sailing Club, yeah, we're going to talk about that in a moment. I've done a fair amount of RC yachting, Steve Gruber says. Is it more like real sailing than it is? It is, I think he said, Matt. It is more like real sailing than you might think. Boat balance and sail trim are crucial. Emmett's saying they have a fleet at Castle Cove Sailing Club. Hello, Pedro Foiling Sailor. What time is it? Yeah, this time changes. Worley is saying having the kids build model boats to sail would help them learn about designing boats.
That's a good idea.
That's a point. Anything else on all that?
I must say what I was struck with most is that I was introduced to this crowd in 1964, and I was incredibly young at the time, and I'm incredibly old now. God,
aren't we all? Hamish is not. Hamish is good.
I just go, woo! How did that happen?
Well, indeed. Just a little bit more on the Hall of Fame. It is, and we've had who was it? Greg Phillips was in the Australian Fozy from. He's from the Gold Coast, isn't he? Is he from Brisbane? Where's Greg Phillips? I don't know if Greg's on here, but Greg was up in Nova Scotia, went through Newport, took a video, did an interview with the former executive director of the Sailing Museum, and gave us a nice personal tour earlier this year.
It was good.
It was really good. And here's a quick video. So those of you who are in Newport, Rhode Island, the spiritual heart of sailing, at least in this country, the Sailing Museum, Lower Thames Street, Newport, Rhode Island, the old armory where the press conferences used to be for the America's Cup before we lost it in '83. And here's a quick video about the museum. Well, you get the idea, and there are a lot of interactive exhibits, or so I'm told. Greg Phillips just chimed in here. I see that he's on. And the thing that I wonder about. We don't need to debate it here, but I've said to the folks, I said, you got the Sailing Museum, and then you've got the National Sailing Hall of Fame. Most of the sports, the Hall of Fame's a big deal for hockey, baseball, football, basketball, and so on. Why don't you just rebrand it or just overall brand it as the National Sailing Hall of Fame? That sounds a lot more interesting than the Sailing Museum, which sounds like you and me, Julia, old and fusty. What do you think, Hamish?
I think it looks fantastic. I can't wait to have the opportunity to go and have a look at it. I think it's highly commendable, and it can only do great things for the sport. Well, I think they've done a fantastic job.
You being the historian that you are, I think that's a nice endorsement for the Sailing Museum. We'll debate that another time, whether it should be the Sailing Museum.
It's going to be hard for them to give up their names. Oh.
It'd be easy. Just rename it now, because they're already saying now the Sailing Museum and National Sailing Hall of Fame incorporating.
Right.
The other thing, Hamish, you may not know, or you may know, that they're trying also to bring into the Sailing Museum the America's Cup Hall of Fame, bring it down from Bristol, Rhode Island, down the shore of Narragansett Bay. And therefore, I think if they would become the National Sailing Hall of Fame, incorporating the America's Cup Hall of Fame, well, even that makes sense. Now, when I sit here and think about it. Okay, enough of that. I don't think it's croutonic. I don't know what that means, John Mangino. Can I download that vid in its entirety? I spotted a trophy, which I need to revisit. Yes, it's on YouTube, Fritz, and if not, I'll send you a link, or I'll WeTransfer it to you myself. Jonathan Frank saying, the one thing I realize about Newport is how many 12 meters have been lovingly restored and are still sailing in that area. Hamish, what about that? The 12s go on and on and on. There's a few J boats, but the 12s all around the world, not all around the world, but in Europe and in Newport in particular, are still a big deal.
I'm a huge fan. The only thing more than the America's Cup I'm enthusiastic about, it's sailing old boats, restoring them, and maintaining them. And 12 meters, of course, were born with the international rule back in the early 1900s. And I think it's fantastic that some of these America's Cup icon boats, not only have they been preserved, but they're still out there racing. And I've had the privilege of racing on Courageous. It's an absolute pleasure to be sailing on a unique piece of history. And I know we're going to get onto the subject shortly about sailing history, particularly here in New Zealand, but I think it's just fantastic. I just think it's such a lot of history and heritage that just makes these boats so special. It's something unique.
Indeed, exactly. And with that, I think I'm going to jump to John Emmett's segment, and then we're going to go back to Hamish for the theme of today's show, which is Rainbow's 125th birthday. Fascinating tale that he's got to tell. In the meantime, let's go to the coach's corner. John Emmett checking in from a new club. I don't think Draycote Water Sailing Club. I'm not sure we've had a report from him there before. Maybe we have. I've lost track, but that's where he was. Let me tell you a little bit about that club. The Draycote Water Sailing Club, beautiful club on a reservoir up near Birmingham.
Grab a couple of shots of Talisker, Tom, to help your voice.
A couple of shots of what, Hamish?
Talisker.
What is that, Scotch?
It's a good Scotch from the Isle of Skye.
Well, I'll tell you what's croutonic is that I've got a cough drop here that I'm putting in my mouth and then taking it out. Julia's watching me do that, saying, what a crouton.
No, I'd rather have you do that so you don't have to cough.
Meanwhile, the Draycote Water Sailing Club on a reservoir up near Coventry, up near Birmingham. And that's where John checks in from today.
Hi, Tom, Julia, and all the folks. I'm here at Draycote Water Sailing Club, and I thought it might be quite nice to do a walk and a talk showing you a day in the life. So hence the wet hair. I'm fresh off the water, and it is pretty fresh now in November, and I've actually been doing quite a lot of swimming here at Draycote Water Sailing Club. And before people wonder, yes, it is intentional. I've been helping put together for Fenhurst Books the new laser book, which will be called the Ilka book, because we're now all Ilkas. It's something I'm trying to get my head around, but I think it's a very good thing having all these different builders and driving the quality and hopefully also driving the price, which is good for sailors. And it just means that, you know, you can get an Australian boat in Europe or a European boat in Australia, and this just makes it easier. But yeah, it is pretty hard for me to remember. The reason I'm here, not only because Fenhurst Books is based at Draycott Water, but we just had the Inland Championships, which for the UK domestic season, it's the last event of the year. So we've had the Masters inland, it was full on inland. Just going to show you, this isn't even half the boat park. And this is a very, very friendly and active club, and it's where Jess comes from. So I don't know if you remember, I did a few interviews. So Jess has just come out of the topper and she's now in the Ilka 4, and she's won the last 2 qualifiers, and she also won the inlands. So this is where they do all their sailing, and it's a really safe environment. So having been up here for the weekend, I thought it was a really good opportunity to take some photos. And what the book is trying to do, and I won't take you for too long a walk or talk is the clubhouse, but is to look after those new people to the sport, whether it's new Ilka sailors or whether it's new people to sailing full stop, and to help them sail in a safe, fun way and stop them making the mistakes that we all did when we first started sailing. So this is the first half of the sailing club, and just been on the water trying to show people how to rig their boat, how to recover from a capsize, and all these skills that make sailing so much more fun. And one of the good things about doing YouTube videos or writing books is you can just get the message out to far more people than you can ever get to through coaching. And I was thinking about my particular skill set. Okay, there's my boat, and the people who've been helping me do this is really with the top end and doing that one-to-one stuff. So actually it's a really good mix to do the club support as well. And actually, even for the best sailors, getting back to basics, it's really important, because a good race is normally more about getting the big thing right, whether it was finding the pressure on a light wind day, escaping the current when the current was very strong, tacking on the shifts where it was a really shifty day. So going back to basics is very important, and I hope to get this book out in time for the next Olympic Games and help another load of sailors. So that's it for today. Comments always welcome, and it's definitely time for me to go and get out my wetsuit. See you on the show.
John Emmett. John Emmett Sailing, get to the front of the fleet. Nice stuff. As always, nice stuff from John. And we're going to get to Hamish now. But a couple of comments. I think John Mangino has broken the code, has come up with a suggestion. Call it the National Sailing Hall of Fame and Museum.
Mm-hmm.
We got a bunch of smart people on here.
Why not?
If anybody has a question about the sport, Hamish, and needs a solution, send it here to the FOSI. Send it here to us. We'll put it up and ask for an answer, and we'll get one. We may get 5, but
that's right. No, I'm always astounded at what good stuff comes out of the FOSI.
The National Sailing Hall of Fame and Museum. Hamish, what do you think?
Sounds fine to me. I'm quite happy, whatever it's called.
Oh, that was diplomatic.
I'm more worried about what's inside it.
Huzzah, Hamish was a comment from that erudite painter pilot and sailor Jonathan Frank down in Texas. David James is asking, where is Intrepid? Any idea, Hamish? Where's Intrepid? It's in Newport too, isn't it?
I thought it was part of that Newport grouping that is based there.
What else? The sailing show with a cough drop problem.
I know. I thought
True, Graham Sweeney. Yeah, Jeff Kitson making the point. that's a lot of dried moored dinghies, and it's no mystery why, Hamish, why your country, Australia, and the UK, to name three, you can argue about one or two others, but you've got facilities like that all over your respective countries, and no wonder you're
and countrywide programs.
and countrywide programs. It's no mystery though why those three countries, right, Julia?
Absolutely.
Is that it, Hamish?
I think being the proximity to water. I mean, Australia, of course, is a big country, but the bulk of the population lives pretty close to the coast, and obviously we exist on a collection of islands, and Britain, of course, is an island itself. So I'm sure that has a factor in sailing's popularity and infusion into the population.
Yeah, I'm sure too.
Okay, let's get to Hamish's theme today, and delighted to have him come on. We were talking the last, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 days. Hey, he's talking about Rainbow's 125th birthday, which is a yacht he co-owns, A7. You see it here in the cover slide. So we're delighted to have Hamish with us, Dr. Hamish Ross, properly, and we go way back, at least to what, 2000, Hamish, something like that. And I don't remember, was that the first cup we did together, 2000?
Yes, it would have been.
Not exactly together, but against each other.
Yes, I think we crossed swords in the late '90s and during the Louis Vuitton series of the 1999 series, I think.
May I tell the story of how we first met?
Of course, it's your show.
Well, no, I'm always very polite, especially to esteemed guests. But I think I've said it before on the show, so it's nothing too, too revelatory. Is that a word? That's how the Brits would pronounce it.
Oh yeah.
We were down in Auckland, and I was down there representing 2000, would have been your club, Julia.
Yeah.
St. Francis Yacht Club, Paul Caird.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to a jury meeting or some rules meeting or something. And in walks, they were all in sailing clothes and topsiders or flip flops or whatever we're in. And in walks this guy, not in a full suit, but you could tell he'd taken his tie off. He was in a suit, tie, full on, nice, polished, dark shoes.
Looking like a lawyer.
Like he'd just come from his law office at Bell Gully, which he had. And there's Hamish Ross. And I'm thinking, who the hell is this crouton? And it turns out he's pretty bright. And even though we were on opposing sides of some issues, we often agreed, which was refreshing. Right, Hamish?
Oh, of course. In fact, it was Jim Brady, Olympic medalist, who was on with Young America, who told me I had to take the tie off. He said it was a bit overdressed. I said, well, next time you better get me a polo shirt then.
And did he?
He did. No, he came good.
Well, so did you. And you were, and have been ever since, a terrific advocate for the Cup in general. You've represented your side of the fence well as, you and I could do deals during the Alinghi days, and we'd meet off on the side. In fact, I remember another time, Hamish, we were in the midst of a big court action in New York City, and you were staying, I was staying at New York Yacht Club as usual, in one of the bedrooms there, and you were down the street in the Iroquois Hotel, or one of the hotels right there. And you and I decided to take tea or coffee in the lobby of one of, I guess it was your hotel. And we were sitting there off in the corner, and in walked, remember?
Yes.
Ernesto Bertarelli and Ernesto's lawyer. And they saw us off in the corner, and you and I both kind of buttoned up. Oh, we're just having a coffee.
Yeah.
And we're friends, and we trying to sort stuff out. So,
yeah.
What else, Hamish? You can tell a story now.
Oh, we sorted a lot of stuff out. I tell you, my first cup experience was quite a shock, actually, and it was how the American syndicates were all challengers in 99, 2000. They were so competitive with each other. I mean, much more so than with the others. And that came as quite a surprise to me, because I think that they'd kind of be working together and trying to be the challenger. But my God, it was pretty cutthroat as between the American teams. And as a New Zealander, I found that quite disconcerting, I must say.
Well, we, speaking on behalf of Julia's Yacht Club, St. Francis, whom I was representing then, we saw you, New York Yacht Club, you were with New York, as the primary competition in the Louis Vuitton Cup and the Challenger Selection Series.
Yes, I think we became favourites too early, and I think this paints a big target on your back, and I think that was part of the problem.
Well, that was part of the problem. Wasn't the only problem, but we don't need to, we don't need to go into that now. Okay, let's go into a more friendly and well, that's a friendly topic. Let's talk, Hamish, about the topic for today, which is this Classic Yachting Association, the stuff you're doing down there. Fantastic stuff. And I'm going to open with this video from the Classic Yacht Association from, I guess, just a couple of years ago. Have a look, everybody.
The Classic Yacht Association, formed in 1995, promotes the ownership, preservation and restoration of classic yachts and launches. It reflects the significant role harbour and coastal seacraft have played in the development of New Zealand communities, and encourages fellowship between all men and women who delight in the pleasure of the sea and craft that sail those seas.
So, Hamish, how long has the Classic Yacht Association been around? And thanks to
It's been around for quite some
Hummingbird.
time. It just must be coming up to about 28 or so years. We formed in the mid 1990s. We were feeling that a group of us got together over a restoration of a yacht. We believed the time had come for a club or an association, and we held a public meeting, and very quickly it all came to fruition. And what it did is we were probably within a couple of decades of losing a lot of the yachts that are the key parts of the club through just aging and neglect. And really, we wanted to focus the efforts and really celebrate New Zealand's history in a proper, practical and meaningful sense. We got to remember that you could take a photograph off the wall of some of our old yacht clubs, and it might show a regatta of 1900 or even in the late 1890s, and we can recreate that picture with the same yachts, and in many cases with descendants of the same crews and owners. It's
amazing.
It's down to a couple of remarkable things. One is the type of construction. So our yacht fleet is a carvel construction. It's not ribbon frame. It's not a frame and plank. They're built on molds, and they're usually made of triple diagonal strips of kauri. Kauri is a native timber. It's a very fine grained timber, and these trees can grow up to 1,000 years old. Very hard to get now, but it seems to have a resin within the kauri that reacts beautifully with salt water. I mean, our hull there on Rainbow has remained for 125 years. It's been in salt water virtually its whole life. Apart from being hauled out for a bit of anti-foul every now and then and a restoration in the early 2000s. So the combination of the fact that these yachts are made of carvel construction and they're quite unique. I remember my first yacht was a boat called Little Jim that featured in that video before. When we had her, I think it was her 75th birthday, when Young America were in town, Olin Stevens came by, and some of the guys from Young America brought her down to Little Jim. And the first thing he did was pull up all the floors of the boat because he wanted to see the construction, because he had heard about the strength of it and how we uniquely built boats here. And he was fascinated in the construction. And it was a great conversation I had with him on board the boat. The other feature, as I mentioned, is kauri timber, and that's been able to promote the preservation of our fleet. It's not to say that the fleet had risks. I mean, as time went on, they were so-called modernized, and sometimes they had unfortunate additions added to the boats. And in the case of Rainbow, it had in the 1950s, they added a cabin to it and other bits and pieces. So during our restoration, we got rid of all of that and returned it to exactly as she was when she was first launched in 1898. And whilst we're celebrating Rainbow's 125th birthday, I want to recognise the fact that there are many of our yachts that are much older than Rainbow who have already gone past their centenary and indeed their 125th birthday. We raced closely with a boat called Thelma, who's a year older than us. A boat called Waitangi, who you saw on the clip with the black hull. I think, and I stand to be corrected by my fellow countrymen, I think she's about 1893, 94. When our oldest yacht is one called Jessie Logan. She dates from about 1880. She's a sort of a half-decker, and she's a boat that's undergone extensive restoration, but is one of the first known yachts of the Logan brothers. And the Logan brothers and the Logan family were responsible for a large chunk of our yachting heritage. They were in intense competition with the Bailey family, and that competition created a lot of the yachts, including my own, which I have in partnership with other well-known sailors such as Brad Butterworth and Chris Bazade and David Glenn. And they are, the rivalry between the families in the late Victorian and Edwardian periods created a wonderful period of golden sailing in New Zealand and laid the foundation for future victories.
I didn't realize that Buzaid was a partner of yours too. I saw some pictures and I almost put them in the show of Chris and Lydia, who are longtime dear friends of mine from Newport, Rhode Island days, on the boat. I just thought you'd taken them out, and I think the pictures were from March or something this year, and you just taken them out for a sale.
Welcomed Chris a couple of years ago to the syndicate. We had a very long time owner, the Dimmock family, and Rod Dimmock. I guess what happens to us all, we age a bit, and he decided to sell his share in the syndicate, and Chris Bazade bought it back, which is an interesting piece of history because the Dimmock family bought it from Leo Bazade, Chris's father. So the boat basically stayed in the family, and the boat's had about half a dozen owners since its launch. Another notable owner was someone called J.C. Mackey. He used to be a Commodore of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, and he lost his life tragically on the Lusitania, which was torpedoed in 1915 during the First World War off the coast of Ireland, and that helped in an indirect way bring America into the First World War. And he and his wife gave up their position in the lifeboat, saying that they were old, they had lived their life, and they decided that despite their having first-class tickets, they would give their seat up to someone younger who had more life to live, which is a nice little rabbit hole to go down.
Yes.
How about this boat? Your boat's A7. How about A2? And this is
Yes, that's a boat called Rafferty that has undergone extensive restoration about 10, 15 years ago. She has an interesting history. Rafferty means sunshine in Maori. She was built by she was commissioned by the same owner that built Rainbow. He was an active sailor, and he used to have those boats built in Auckland, race around New Zealand, and then race over in Sydney. And this yacht itself, he'd moved to Sydney for business, and he had this yacht built in New Zealand, and it became his prime race boat in Sydney. And she remained in Sydney until the Second World War, after the Second World War, and she was bought back by the Marler family. And while most of our yachts tended to be put on board a steamer backwards and forwards, the Marlers, to save the cost of doing so, in 1945-46 it was, they sailed across the Tasman Sea, which is not known for being a particularly placid section of seawater. And they had quite an adventure, but they got back in one piece, and it rejoined the New Zealand sailing fleet, and there she has remained ever since, and she's one of the pride of the Classic Yacht Association. She's bigger than Rainbow, and so therefore she's usually out front, and she sailed very, very well at the moment by Peter Brooks.
How do you handicap? Do you race straight up, boat for boat, or do you handicap somehow?
Well, we've got 100 years of results. So all the performance data is available. And frankly, we all know whether you've had a good race or not. And frankly, between us all, we could go to the bar after the race and decide between ourselves without actually having to look at the official results as to who ought to have won the race, because we know we're roughly where we should have come.
You're serious? Yeah, you're not kidding us. You go into the bar and you decide who.
No, I'm not being serious. I'm just saying that the sort of thing we could be doing. And but look, they are handicapped based on past performance, and sometimes people don't do so well. The handicap drops a bit. They do very well, and the handicap goes up a bit. So it has a very equalizing effect on racing.
Is it time on distance? What kind of a handicap is it?
Yeah, it's just time on distance. It's a pretty plain vanilla handicapping system that we use. There's always grumbles, of course, when the handicaps get announced and think, oh, he's a bit higher, it'll be a bit lower than me. But hey, that's yacht clubs all around the world.
That's for sure. A lot of cool comments here. Jonathan Frank saying that about the previous video. That is a proper sailing video. No 1 second clips. Nobody screaming. Very pleasant music. Huzzah! That's the second huzzah you've gotten from Jonathan.
Yeah.
Frank and Fritz Mueller saying, look at, as a keen observer, watch the wake these yachts throw.
I was looking at that.
Next to nothing.
Nothing.
Fabulous stuff. Alistair saying, Hamish, I have an amazing book, the amazing book by Ivor Wilkins titled Classic, The Revival of Classic Boating in New Zealand. Please tell the Fozy about it.
It is a great book. Ivor Wilkins, who writes for the Squadron magazine and is a long-time yachting historian and journalist in New Zealand, fantastic fellow, produced this absolutely wonderful coffee book. It's highly recommended, which tells the tale of the Classic Yacht Association, but more importantly, the tale of these various yachts that make up Pride of its fleet. And Ivor's just done a fantastic job on that book. It came out a few years ago. Rainbow features in it, and as does a number of the yachts that have been pictured and displayed on the show so far.
A couple other comments. Clayton Embley saying, the one design boats attract the sailors, the classics attract the public. You'd sure say that in France. In fact, I would tell you that this weekend, one of the things that has developed is that Northern California and Southern California, there was a little discussion between our Commodore and our mutual friend Peter McDonald, and they are progressing the idea of the two classic groups getting together here on the West Coast, which is only good, can only be good. They may even do Long Point Race Week.
Oh, that would be fun.
So good stuff happening in that department in the classic.
And Tom, it's great sailing. We don't have any electronics on the yacht whatsoever.
Exactly.
It's seat of the pants sailing. And, Brad's a partner of ours, and so is Chris, as I mentioned. And I think that's the part they really enjoy. They start getting back to simple basics of sailing. And it's just the pleasure of sailing these craft because they go through the water so beautifully, as you pointed out. There's very little wake they create. And they are just stunning. Just being part of this fleet is a unique process. And we took great pleasure in bringing people with a connection with the boat. Might be their great-grandfather used to sail on the yacht, or their grandfather used to own it. And people of all ages. And it's a great opportunity to train kids in sailing. And during my time in Sailing Classics, I've thoroughly enjoyed meeting all sorts of people from different walks of life who I may never have met. And in some cases with some young people, they've come up to me as adults and said that was one of those fantastic experiences of their life. And that just gives you so much of a great warm feeling behind it all.
Well said. Beautifully said. Graham Sweeney saying, to restore a classic yacht takes more than money. It takes a part of your heart that will forever be tied up in those timbers. Don Lunabos, wow, what great history. Thank you. Fritz Mueller, I just can't imagine non-synthetic sails in the day. Only beasts could handle them. Jeff Kitson, every PHRF committee would love 100 years of results to work with. Stingray up in Seattle asking, is it, you know Stingray at least you see him in the Sailing Anarchy forum, so yes. I'm sure you know who he is. Or you don't know him by real name because nobody does except
except
a few of us. Is it my imagination, or are rainbow sails the originals?
No, I mean, the old originals would have been cotton sails, and they wouldn't have lasted both in terms of mildew and extra and the aging of them. Of course, sails, good racing sails, were made of cotton in the 1880s and 90s, and also into the early Edwardian period. These are sails which are cut to make look like old cotton sails, and they are sewn in that old way. And it's just part of the look of the vessel. And yes, we use modern or Dacron sailcloth essentially, because handling old cotton sails would be
heavy.
It's one step too far.
Yeah, I remember I capsized a boat that had cotton sails, and the sails never fit again. They shrunk so much.
Yes.
Hamish, so that there is rainbow. There's your boat. What are those sails actually made of?
It's Dacron. It happens to be what they call a classic dye, which they put a slight dye in them to give it that sort of slightly light tan look, which emulates the effect of original Egyptian cotton. And most of the main sailcloth companies do produce a classic color for sails.
Yeah, that's what Steve Gruber's saying, that many sailmakers offer classic construction in polyester, Dacron, today. Fritz Mueller asking, Fritz in Miami, Hamish, what is the real driving factor for folks to keep the vintage thing alive?
I think it's a sense of history, to be honest. It's the usual camaraderie you get as being part of a boat and a crew, but also it's the sense of living history. And I think our guys really appreciate that they just happen to be the current custodians and crew of a vessel that will live beyond them. And it's just knowing that you're just a part of this piece of history, that's all. And they're also great boats to sail. They are literally wonderful boats to sail. And they're great in a seaway. They're great in all conditions. And look, we look after them. We don't try and thrash them in heavy winds. We usually, discretion is the better part of valor, as you mentioned before. We don't race it when she's supposed to be averaging 25 knots or anything like that. Whereas in a modern boat, you wouldn't think potentially twice of doing it. For us, preserving these things for the future is as important as enjoying them.
The first weekend in October, Clayton Embley says, all of the small classics gather at the Chesapeake Bay Maritime Museum. Great sailing, great racing, great fun. Hey, Clayton, that's behind us now, but next year, send us a video. Take a video of that, please. Do you see David James's comment, Julia? You want to read that?
Replying to Stingray, Justin Gray, according to the ship of Theseus.
The Theseus paradox.
Theseus paradox.
I thought you, as a Stanfordite, would know what that is.
I don't know.
I can talk a bit to that.
Okay, let Julia finish. Let Julia finish the comment.
If an object has had all of its original components replaced, it remains the same object.
What I can say in our case, it's not. The often example is Grandpa's hammer. You know, Grandpa changed the handle and Dad changed the head a couple of times. Is it the same hammer? And with classic yacht restoration, that is always a risk. And I can say in the case of New Zealand and the Kauri vessels in New Zealand, is they generally, on the whole, retain the majority of their hull. Probably end up 2/3, if not 3/4 of their hull. They are the same vessel. Yes, the spars may be newer, and some of the restoration is required to the decks and to return some of the interior to as it was. But fundamentally, they are the same vessel. I'm aware that some of the big restorations in Europe and in North America require a good deal of replacement, and that paradox does come into play. But in our case, we are original. And I should say one further thing is, in the last weekend of January, we all get together at the Maharangi Classic Yacht Regatta, and it is the New Zealand Classic Yacht Regatta. If you're ever in this part of the world and at the end of January, come down to Maharangi, and I'll certainly put a place on board. If not Rainbow, then another yacht like Rainbow, and you'll have a sail experience like you'll never have before.
Well, speaking of which, that's a nice segue into this final video. Hamish, this is the 2022 regatta, correct? That's what this video is?
Yes.
Let's have a
Yes.
look at it. Hamish, you want to do any voiceover of this video?
Yeah, of course. You can see Rafferty coming in behind with a bit of pace on. Rainbow's obviously A7 is moving up to protect the wind a little bit. We have the Bermudan rig A18, which is Tara, a boat from the 1930s, when the Bermudan rig became used in yacht construction a lot more. Most of our restorations are heading back towards gaff rig if the boat was originally gaff rigged, and that's why you're seeing a lot more gaff rig vessels there. I'm just strolling through and just trying to spot other vessels there. So here we are leaving Maharangi Harbour to go around Saddle Island, and then we head up towards a couple more further islands further out and race back into the harbour for the win. Yes, I record Tara and Nari taking some of our paint off the stern just about.
What was that about? A18 ducking below your transom.
Yes, it was rather close. I do recall that one. But hey, they did a good job. And away we go. That looks like Rainbow there. Yes, there we go.
What's it like to sail with Butterworth on one of these things?
Oh, he's not too bad. We knock him into shape. He makes a great cup of tea for us. No, he loves it. He loves it. We like having him on board as well. You couldn't get a more enthusiastic classic yacht sailor than Butterworth. And he comes from a fine tradition, because I'm aware that DC is a clean classic sailor. I think most of the sailors just love being on it, to be honest. And we've had a few ex-Team New Zealand guys come and sail with us, and without a doubt and without a single exception, they've just loved the experience.
Looks like you're quick.
Oh, we're not too slow. We pretty much have the starts nailed pretty well. Just that the finishing can be a bit of a problem.
Who's the yacht to windward of you?
That's Rafferty. She's a bigger vessel, and she will pull ahead. And then it'll give us a bit of dirty air.
Oh, that's A2 again. I couldn't see the make. Oh, there now I can see it.
Yeah, no, she's a beautiful yacht, and built from the same yard for the same owner, and no, she's a magnificent vessel.
125 years old.
Whole show in every one of these boats. They've got such magnificent histories.
Sorry, say again.
We could do a whole show in every one of these yachts, and look, what you're seeing there is not our whole fleet. I'd say that was barely a quarter of the fleet that happened to be there for that particular sail.
And 125 years old.
Yep. Yesterday. In fact, right now, she went for her first sail 125 years ago.
Wow.
And I've got a photograph of that first sail, which I'm not sure if you've seen yet, but I did flick it to you on Skype earlier.
Not seen it. I'll run it in the next Tuesday's show.
Yes.
Stingray's asking, when did gaff rigs start on racing yachts?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I go back to America, for example, and she had a gaff rig, even though she was a schooner. I would think that they probably started virtually with the birth of yachting almost. But I stand to be corrected. It's probably very early. In our part of the world, the Bermudan rig really sort of took off much the same as it did in the America's Cup through the 1930s, that the Bermudan, or the leg of mutton rig, as they used to call it.
For extra credit, when America was rounding the Isle of Wight clockwise and was down on the south side and the breeze beating up the south side of the island, what came apart on America?
It was a spar, wasn't it? It was one of the spinnaker poles or something of that nature, wasn't it?
Close. Let's see if any of the Fozy know. See if any of the Fozy come up with the answer.
I believe they had a spar and a sail made locally prior to the race, and I don't think Stevens was that pleased with it, and I think he was rather happy that the spar broke and he could just get rid of it.
That is the word. Margarita Marshall. Hello, Margarita. It was great to being with her down in Newport Beach this past weekend. We hugged and talked, and people kept coming over because they saw Margarita and myself hanging out, talking quietly. And we were talking about Bruno Trublet and about Louis Vuitton and about all the stuff that's going on in the Cup. Hi from sunny Sydney. Hi, Pricey. David Price. Margarita saying it's the bowsprit. No, I don't think it was the bowsprit either, Margarita. I think Hamish is close. It was, they had a club-footed boom on the jib that the Brits had apparently talked him into putting on America. And I think, from memory, I think that's what it was. I just came to my brain. Now, it wasn't that the gaff rig, but that club-footed boom broke. Yes. And they went faster after it broke, apparently. I'll never forget sailing my Fireball upwind one time, and the forestay broke, and suddenly the mast rakes back another 6 inches, and I'm just the only thing that's keeping the mast up is the jib, the luff wire and the jib, and man, we were rocket fast all of a sudden. We went so fast.
Well, in one regatta in New Zealand on classic yachts, you could total up the ages of the boat and end up to 2,000 or 3,000 years old without too much difficulty.
Rick Bannerow saying, how's Margarita's voice of you two? Well, the truth is my voice was crotonic all weekend. And we were whispering in part because of my voice, and we were up close. And it wasn't because I was sick or it wasn't because I'd partied. It's another thing that I think we've identified. Probably doing too many shows. Fritz Mueller.
And he did 10 or something in a short period of time.
Well, but Graham Sweeney, working vessels had gaff rigs as they could be easily handled, and short spars were available. Tall masts for Bermuda rigged yachts had to be made, indeed. And tough, exactly right. Bannerow had another point. I'm going back up higher in the comments. We're going to hold you to this, Rick, the Fuzzy Fozy. He said that something about the classic yachts at one of the clubs on Long Island Sound. I'll forward a portfolio of pics from the Indian Harbor. Now, there's a nice club in Riverside, Connecticut, Greenwich, Connecticut, just outside of New York City. I'll forward a portfolio of pics from the Indian Harbor Yacht Club Classic Yacht Regatta this past September. It sounds like we've struck a chord here, guys. Yes. That we're talking about classic yachts, and we know that John Lamberts Van Buren, who's also is expert, and he's going to come on the show and do a segment for us. But there's a lot of interest in this, notwithstanding what goes on in France, in the south of France, every September, October.
Yeah, John is a very big, enthusiastic supporter of classic yachting worldwide, particularly in the meter boats, obviously the 12s, the 8s, etc. And he's closely associated with that, which are very, very strong in Northern Europe. And John's business line, of course, is to supply wonderful brand new spruce and Seeker spars he has some cutting rights in Alaska. So he's a great source of spar material.
Indeed. Quite a discussion about gaff rigs. And I'm going to go back up to Fritz Mueller's comment. Let's see, I think it's up off it's above where we are here in the comments. There's a lot of interest in the vintage game, stars, dragons, fins, 110s, even in the classic Moth. Is there a movement out there reacting to the Grand Prix everything sexy and expensive mentality?
It's a different.
What do you think, Julia? What do you think?
I grew up on a boat that had no electronics and loved the water and loved to sail and sailed, just evenly and easily and talk to you as it sailed. And that's what these yachts do.
Well, how about here at your club right now?
Yeah.
With the classic yachts and the big boat series, it's getting bigger and bigger each year.
Yes.
And people like K-Art are sailing in the classic yachts instead of on the Grand Prix yachts.
Yes.
Hamish? Is there a movement here, or is this just a blip?
Yes, I think there's a strong movement. I think that the mentality of build, use, throw away is passing us by, and I think if we can make use of these older craft that have wonderful pieces of history associated with them, is a great thing. And one thing I've seen over the last 30 or 40 years that I've been involved with classic yachting is that, I mean, it's kind of like motherhood. No one hates the thing. Everybody loves it.
Exactly.
And it's here to stay. It's growing. And you know, the guys who are involved in the America's Cup, you know, I saw Bertelli's name mentioned by one of the Fozies. I mean, he's a very keen, enthusiastic supporter of classic yachting in the Mediterranean. And you know, if I have a choice to go to one regatta around the world, I'd pick the used to be called the New Larg. It's now called the Saint-Tropez Regatta, where classics of all sizes gather and race. It's an iconic event in the world calendar of classic yacht sailing, and indeed sailing as a sport. I'm also aware of the Egmogan Reach that I believe takes you up to where Wooden Boat magazine is situated up in Maine. I'd dearly love to be sailing that regatta one day with all the fine classics that exist on the East Coast.
Another couple comments, then we'll move on and let you get back to work, Hamish. What time is it down there in Auckland? 11:17 in the morning?
11:15 in the morning. But hey, you can always divert me when it comes to classic yachting.
That's nice.
Yeah, Fog Machine on YouTube is saying one hears that Rolex is more interested in the big boat series classic class, Julia, than the aging glass boats. We'll see if that's true or not.
That probably is true.
Margarita Marshall saying how important in Italy the classic yachts are. Very, very important. And on and on and on. Oh, one other point Ted Ryman is making. You see Ryman's comment. Not forgetting Cow's Classics Week in July, which is another big deal, right, Hamish? Have you sailed in that?
No, I've not sailed on that. That's again on the bucket list. But the thing about classic yachting is you're preserving old sailing skills. You know, you're preserving the ability to hoist and lower a spinnaker, to put up a topsail, to get involved in old-fashioned rigging and knots and skills and things that so easily can be passed by in a modern yacht. And indeed, as we see at the top end of the sport, I mean, when's the last time we saw a spinnaker takedown in the America's Cup?
You just made Andy Rose and Gary Jobson and a few other people very happy with that comment, which is also a perfect segue. Folks, we did not rehearse this. Hamish, thank you. But that's a perfect segue to our next segment, which is the American Cup boat race. And as Julia hates it when I call it that, AC 37 Cup date. And of course, the big question in everybody's mind is, that's not me, is the Cup really going to take place, this meaningless preliminary regatta, except for the money to the organizers, meaning Grant Dalton and that? Are they really going to the yacht club in Jeddah? They keep promoting America's Cup build-up round. This is from stuff.co.nz. A week ago, we ran this headline. Unaffected by the Gaza conflict, they keep trying to tell us this is the video promotion that I'm going to air it again, that we ran last Tuesday. Have a look. So that's coming up.
Yes.
I sound like a teenage boy.
Well, you never know.
I'd be so lucky. That's coming up in just 3 weeks' time. And here's another video that just came out with this press release. Hamish, you want to read this? This will really get you turned on.
I'd rather not, to be perfectly honest.
Me too.
Julia?
From sand to sea, inspiring the next generation of Saudi sailors. Saudi Arabia may not be the first place you'd expect to find a burgeoning sailing scene, but sailing is, in fact, a deep-rooted part of the country's heritage. From the dhow boats, which ferried pilgrims to Mecca, to their historical reliance on water for trade, for hundreds of years, Saudis have made seafaring a way of life. While it has skipped a couple generations, sailing is making a strong comeback in the kingdom, thanks to concerted efforts from the Saudi Sailing Federation and the Ministry of Sport as a part of the country's Vision 2030.
Well done. Thank you. And that's, of course, from a press release that came out yesterday or today. And they are claiming that they're going ahead, and we're going to ask Hamish what he knows or thinks in a moment. But let me play first this video, which came out with this press release, and listen carefully, because there's some interesting criticisms.
It was my first time ever foiling on a foiling boat. It was really, really fun, especially when you fly. The women have I think they'll have just as much fun as the guys. They'll, beat the guys if they sail against them. I'm very happy the foiling team came to Saudi to show people the things that can be done and expose the community to all these different activities that nobody even probably knows about. A lot of people don't know about. So I think it's really cool to introduce that here.
تجربتي اليوم كانت مع الإي فولينج مرة رائعة وممتازة جدا صراحة. هذه أول مرة أجربها ومرة انبسطت إنها هي موجودة في جدة سيزن. فأول ما شفتها كانت بالنسبة لي فكرة جيدة إنه الواحد يجرب أشياء جديدة ما كانت موجودة قبل كده في عندنا. مرة فخورة بالتجربة، كان كل شيء مرة مرتب ومنظم والطريقة التعليم كانت جدا ممتازة. واعتقد اني راح ارجع مرة تانية عشان اكمل الإي فولينج مرة تانية لين ما اصير ان شاء الله ادفانس فيها.
If you get kids starting to experience something like this from the early on, I think it would kick off really fast.
Okay, the somewhat unceremonious end to that video, but what do you think, Hamish?
I don't believe the America's Cup should be anywhere near Jeddah for all sorts of personal reasons that I have. The America's Cup should have been here in Auckland. Yes. It should not have been in Barcelona.
Yes.
And I vehemently disagree it going to Saudi Arabia, even for a showcase event of this nature. Whilst I don't doubt the sincerity of the other people who spoke in that short video, and I'm pleased for them. They're having the experiences that they are. But the America's Cup does not belong in Saudi Arabia for all sorts of reasons and on many levels.
Julia?
Well, I agree. I mean, I probably wouldn't have said it first as Hamish did, but it belongs in Auckland.
Exactly. Jeff Ogle, don't call it sailing, just call it foiling. I despise it. It killed the America's Cup for me. Rant over. Joe Holtzman, totally agree, I guess, with Hamish. Clark Chapin, well-spoken Hamish. AC needs to be in New Zealand. Fritz Mueller, Ted Ryman, I agree with Hamish. I'm not surprised. Fog Machine, the Al Ghafal Dow race in Dubai looks really cool. Zillions of Latino. Yes, it does. And if they were over on the Persian Gulf and not in the if they were over there, I think that would be a little bit different situation, but I'm not sure much. The sailing is such a nice distraction from the prison vibes, Stingray says. Oh, Stingray. Yeah, Clark Chapin, especially when you fly. That was a weird comment. Land to sea. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that comment, Clayton Emily. I know where you're going with that. I'm not going to read Stingray's comment. The most, I think, significant comment about the regatta from a sailing standpoint is Jody Shields, who said, I can't wait to watch high performance foiling boats in 3 weeks' time. He doesn't write that, but in foiling boats bobbing around at 6 knots. Wake me up when it's over. And that, I'm afraid, is what's going to happen. Here's the other thing that is happening. The U.S. in the last couple of days has put an Ohio-class nuke submarine into that body of water. And yes, they're south of Jeddah, is south of where the war, it's not a conflict, it's a war that's increasing with each passing day.
Yes.
Why anybody in their right mind continues to try to run a regatta other than for the money, follow the money, why anybody continues to do this. I know that several teams are fighting it. Whether or not they do some kind of a workaround and don't send their A team and send a junior team or something else, if in fact the ARB panel does not excuse them from participating. And there is apparently an action again before the ARB panel, although I'm not sure Alinghi is part of that action. Some people have asserted that Alinghi was involved in that. I'm not sure that's true. Hamish, do you have any later info on all that?
No, I have nothing further I can add.
But it's not a good look, and they ought to just call it off and say, and blame it on the war. Don't blame it on, people not wanting to go to Saudi Arabia or Saudi Arabia's human rights. None of our countries is perfect, least of all ours. But don't blame it on Saudi Arabia. Blame it on the war and the dangerous conditions and the fact that the insurance companies are not happy. Even though some of the boats are there, Alinghi is there sailing around. Have you seen that? Their AC-40s are there sailing around. Meanwhile, Team New Zealand's A boat, their A team is back down in New Zealand. Guess what? In your what is it? Your springtime there, late spring? Is it late spring? It's kind of mid-spring, and practicing in beautiful Auckland, which is where this entire event, as we all know, ought to be being held. Hamish, I couldn't resist. I couldn't resist putting in the poster for this new movie we hear is being produced, called Dalton of Arabia. And the gay scenes are being removed for Saudi viewing. Julia, what do you think of that?
Oh, I think it's wonderful.
Have you heard? You haven't seen that. You haven't heard about that movie?
Yes, I have. I had a preview.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Did you watch it?
No.
Have they taken the gay scenes out? Hamish, have you seen this movie?
Well, I've perhaps seen the original, but I'm not sure I've seen the latest edition that's been advertised here.
Well, thank you to whoever sent us that poster. I think it was clever, and I couldn't resist using it. Now, as I mentioned, Team New Zealand is already back on their big boat in New Zealand. Bravo Zulu to them. And here's a video from today of their training in New Zealand. That's a small boat.
On the LEQ-12 again for a while after being overseas. Pretty nice conditions, sort of 8 to 10 there at the start, and saw about 17 or 18 towards the end. How did the boat feel? Everything going well on board?
Yeah, it was awesome to get back out on the LEQ 40 again and back into some more testing back here in New Zealand. And it's definitely a pretty nice day to be out there. It was that norwesterly, so it's super shifty, super puffy. Few rain cells and stuff going through, so we kind of saw 0 to 18 knots or something. Made it a pretty tricky day to get back into it, but good fun.
Yeah, nice. And we noticed there are a few new additions, a few changes on board the boat. The biggest one being the new foil on port side. How did that feel?
Yeah, we're really happy with it. Didn't have any issues today, so it'll be interesting to go back and have a good look through the data and just check it was doing what we thought it would. But yeah, it's an exciting part of the program.
Did you notice a difference in sort of the top speed and that upper range conditions with the new foil compared to the one you're running on starboard?
No, not too much to be honest. We haven't probably done a whole heap up range on either of those four, so it was really nice to get that little bit in today. Looks like it's going to be pretty nice for it later in the week as well. But yeah, we're just as a sailing team, it's been a while since we've sailed the little boat, so getting comfortable again and the kind of way we sail in the LEQ formats.
Okay, aside from that, it's one of these typically kind of crutonic videos that there's very little information. But they're sailing the LEQ 12. There it is now. And yes, they're not sailing the big boat. They're about to sail the big boat. They're going to splash the big boat, apparently, while they're down there, the new one, and work it up. Remember, the teams can only build one AC-75 this time during this cycle. And we'll see what that boat looks like when they do splash it before they pack it up and ship it back to Barcelona, excuse me, in due course. Okay, I can't take much more of that. Okay. Hamish, can you stay for a little longer?
Oh, yes, I can stay for a little longer. Happy to do so.
Because we've got an America's Cup history challenge now from our esteemed Fozy, Ed Worley. He has sent us a history challenge. Didn't I add music to this once?
Yes.
I got to go back and find that. I put some jazz music to this. Ed Worley's America's Cup history challenge. And let's see if Hamish knows the answer, or indeed, Julia, if you know the answer. The question is Olympic related that Ed sent in last night. AC or the Olympics? The question is, who was the winning skipper, the winning AC winning skipper, quoted as saying, "It's nice to win the America's Cup, but I'll take an Olympic medal"? Was it John Bertrand, the Australian John Bertrand? Was it Dennis Conner? Was it Russell Coutts? Was it Buddy Melgus? All of whom, as you know, probably know, won Olympic medals. Fritz Mueller is saying Coutts. Bannerow is saying, Rick is saying Buddy. Stingray is saying Aristotle. Smith says C, Coutts. Ryman says C. Greg Phillips says A, Bertrand. Jody Shields says, I'm sorry, I can't hit the cough switch. Jody is saying Monica Lewinsky. Kitson says Buddy. Mangino says, boy, we got him stumped. David James says Melgus. Over to you, Hamo. Who was it?
Look, I don't know for certain. It's the sort of thing Russell would say.
You're going with Coutts. Julia?
I was thinking Russell too, but I don't know.
You're going with Coutts. With Cooter, as we used to call him. You know, you can't use that word. Cooter's not a polite word, is it, Hamish, in some countries?
No.
I'll tell you after the show what it means
later
in some countries.
Yeah. Right.
We called him Cooter, though, nonetheless. Jeff Ogle is saying Dicko. Noah? All won medals first. True. That is true. David James says Melgus. I think I won't mention that. Coutts takes the Finn gold medal that really mattered. That's true, Fritz Mueller. It's Connor's, isn't it? Was Monica a grinder? Or did she work on the pointy end?
Gosh, you guys.
That's a finger. That's the first finger wag in a long time.
Yep.
That was pretty good, Fog Machine. I give him credit. Okay, the answer is Muddy Bilges.
Oh, okay, there you go.
The Wizard of Zenda.
Yeah.
There he is winning the gold medal with Billy Allen, who's a Fozy, who's often on here, by the way. Bill Allen, when they sailed to Soling, Bill Benson was the third. And, of course, winning the Cup in 92 at San Diego Yacht Club. I don't think I took that picture. I did take one, though, from that vantage point, approximately. And there they are, thanks to the Washington Post, who did a nice old bit when Buddy passed away a few months ago. Winning the bronze medal. He actually won two. In 64 in Tokyo, they won a bronze medal. Buddy with Bill Benson, who was a slight guy. He was not even that tall and on the wire in an FD, and they were not all that quicklier, as Buddy used to say. They weren't quicklier. They were just okay tactically. Mr. Malgus learned to sail before he could ride a bike, heading out into Lake Geneva in southeastern Wisconsin in small sloops in warmer months and turning to ice boats fitted with sled-like runners and sails in the winter. At the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo, Mr. Malgus and partner Bill Benson won the bronze medal in the FD class. And then fast forward.
Did you notice, Tom, did you notice that medal that was shown on that earlier shot had a chain on it, not a ribbon as they seem to have these days?
Oh, yes.
Let's go back to that photo.
Yeah.
Nice. See, it was Munich.
Good eye. That was Munich, 72.
Nice gold medal.
That was
chain.
Yeah. Probably a lot more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So then we fast forward. Maybe one of you can read this next thing to 72. This is the Soling Gold, won by Buddy Malgus, Bill Allen, and Bill Benson. This was in Munich. There they are on the podium. So he was very much happier with their performance then. And our Fozy, as I said, Bill Allen, who's been on there. Julie, you want to read this?
In Munich, 8 years later, Mr. Malgus teamed again with Benson and another sailor, William Allen, to win Olympic gold in the Soling class. For Mr. Malgus, it was the pinnacle of his sailing life. It's nice to win the America's Cup, he said decades later, but I'll take an Olympic medal.
Yeah, indeed. So there he is, winning the Cup, being congratulated by his team on America Cubed in 1992, 20 years later. And he wins the Cup. Bravos to him, and thanks to Ed Worley for his AC history. He stumped a lot of you today.
Yeah, nice question.
That was a good question.
Good question.
Good question. Okay, so now...
What the Fozies like? Would they like to win a medal or the America's Cup? Now, that would be an interesting question.
Well, let's ask the Foes before we go to this day in history. What would you rather do? Would you rather win an Olympic medal? Let's say a gold medal.
Yeah.
Or the America's Cup?
Yeah.
Julia, let's start with you.
How old am I?
What difference does that make?
Well, because I have a different view of the medal and the America's Cup at my age.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to see what the Fozy think, then we'll finish up with you and Hamish. The AC Stingray says, Pedro says gold medal. Gold medal for Thierry de Jong. America's Cup for Mangino. Ryman says, I'll take the cash from a Hungarian bank. Hungarian TV, maybe from Saudi Arabia. Just to compete in the Olympics would be good enough. Pedro, foiling sailor, is saying that's what Paul Henderson always said.
Mm-hmm.
Kitson, at my age, I'm now happy to make it around the course. Anybody else? The AC is so sophisticated a challenge, Stingray says. Phillips, Greg is saying gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. America's Cup for my country, Julie Aarons likes that.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Worcester, America's Cup. Graham Sweeney, I'm an ex-Brit. I'd rip a leg off with my teeth to go for it at the America's Cup.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Fury, AC, better income stream afterwards. Okay, good. Some good answers. Good question, Hamish. Fritz Mueller replying to Clark Chabon, as was Mike Loeb in the FD, skunked in 80 with Marshall Dwayne. Yeah. Only if Monica was my Bach. What? Oh, my goodness. Joe Holtzman, he likes a gold medal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think I'd rather win the Cup. And, of course, I've won the Cup, so I can say that. I've been on the team a number of times that won the Cup. Hamish, then we'll let Julia go last.
I would go for the America's Cup win, but preferably in one of the older classes.
Well, you've won the Cup, haven't you?
Of course. Same way as you have.
Huh?
Yes.
You've won the Cup twice. Is that
yes. Right? Indeed, I have.
Okay. Yeah. Well, in my
only as part of a team.
My 13 goes. I think I'm 6 wins and 7 losses.
Well, that's pretty good, though.
I was hoping to finish with above 500.
Yeah.
No, I like winning the Cup. I love the Olympics, love the Olympic medal, but there's something about the Cup that in our sport, it is the pinnacle event, right?
Right.
A medal is a medal. The cup you win in a franchise. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question. Julio, you get the final say.
Well, with gold doing what it's doing right now, I think I'd go for the gold.
You're back. You're back talking about finances. Hamish, you should see the pile of gold she has in her safe deposit box. I had to help her.
I'm very sorry about is that they don't traditionally give out America's Cup winner medals. They have done it a few times, but I think it's something that should be solidly re-established. They should actually give out to the winning team a winning medal. They do it in all sorts of other sports, whether it's football or whatever it might be. And I think it's something that they ought to do as a matter of course, that there should be a medal that's rare. And maybe if you've won it as the first time as a challenger, it should be a special medal. I don't know, but I think there should be something more than nothing, basically.
I am pleased to report
yes,
that the 2 cups that I ran, 88, 92, we did just that. We gave medals out.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we kind of were basing it a lot on the Olympics, having come off the 84.
Right.
Olympic, and maybe some other cups have done the same thing, Hamish. Maybe maybe Mark Reed or somebody will remember that others. I think some others may have done similar. What did Royal Perth do? Did they? I don't think Royal Perth gave medals. They may have though.
I don't know.
They've started giving medals in F1 recently. Yes, good point, Ted Ryman, and that is nice. Rolex gave the sailors an engraved watch up to the catamaran. Good point, Rick Bannerone. Of course, Rick used to be helping out with that Rolex initiative endeavor in this country. Okay, let's get back to this day in history, the 7th of November. Here is the year. It's not nautical, but I knew Julie would like this. What happened on this day in history? 7th of November, 1972, my sophomore year in college. Julia?
72. Richard Nixon was elected.
Maybe. Was he elected in 72? Yeah, because he was gone. Then Ford took over. That's right. He got excused. He got excused from further participation, as New York Yacht Club would like. The only president that's been excused. No, close. Actually, this gentleman was elected to the Senate 51 years ago today. It is hard to believe he's still hanging around, and it still says he's going to run again. And he can barely get up and off the stage, and who knows what else. Nixon declared a fraudster. There was a question here. Nixon went off the deep end. Well, he'd already gone off the deep end. I mean, the cover-up's always worse than the crime, right? What is more important to your sailing career, Jody Shields says, the AC or an Olympic medal? And that is a really good point. And I think we'd all agree, Hamish, that the AC, I mean, you and I have been well paid to do our jobs in the America's Cup as rules advisors, as executives and syndicates executives in the organizing committee. We've met a lot of people. We've traveled around the world. We've lived around the world. I mean, Hamish and I and our families lived nearby each other in Puthol, outside of Valencia, and we'd go over and play guitars, and they'd come over, and we'd have Thanksgiving
must have been
dinner.
A great time. Great time.
We drank a little bit of wine, Hamish, not a lot, with our good friend Niccolo Porzio. But I mean, it was a great experience. Meg would have never, a Formula One. Now, Meg would have never gone to school in Spain if it were not for the America's Cup. She may have ended up going to school she did go to school in Germany. Probably would not have gone to school in Switzerland, at college in Switzerland, if it weren't for the America's Cup.
Yeah. One thing I would say, Tom, is that I'm not sure. I've seen a number of Olympic medalists come into the America's Cup, and many of them do extremely well and gain honours. But I think it's no guarantee that if you have an Olympic medal, you're going to be a fantastic America's Cup sailor.
Yes.
And I suppose vice versa, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose it's true. I mean, do we know of anyone who's won glory at the America's Cup and then pursued the Olympics? It's usually the other way around, isn't it?
I think always. I'm trying, but you can still point to a number of people who were Olympic medalists. I mean, Buddy,
yes,
Russell, JB, and any number of others who were Olympians and then really got chosen to go into the America's Cup based on their. Today, that's not the case. I don't think the Olympic. Well, still probably is the truth. Still probably is the pedigree, Olympic pedigree plays a role.
Yeah, but right at the moment they're going into
Sail GP.
Sail GP.
Yeah, well, and KR did. KR. Here's a point. Groover's got the answer to your question. Steve is saying KR did the America's Cup before the Olympics. Good point. Sir Ben, of course, was hugely successful in the Olympics and then went into the AC. Has not been so successful there. A lot of people, including Ted Ryman, are hoping Ben will be an AC winner, but they're not looking so swift. Okay, so that's what happened this day in history. And of course, a number of other things. Hamish, you had something else that happened on this day in history.
Well, I think Stingray might be able to help with this one. There's a day in history in 1940, something to do with a bridge.
A bridge up on the Pacific in the PNW?
Yeah, in the Puget Sound area.
Stingray, you have the answer to what happened on this day in history in the Pacific Northwest.
It's a bit of an engineering one.
Yeah.
Stingray is pondering. He's Googling it. Stingray's got it. He's got it.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah, bridge. Yeah.
Gordon Smith's got it.
Yep.
There you go.
Galloping Gertie. What's that mean? Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Galloping Gertie, was that the name of the bridge as it was oscillating?
Yes. Well, it was known as Galloping Gertie, but it was the bridge failure. Of course, that famous piece of footage that you can all see on YouTube and other places these days. And they learned a lot from that. I believe it was partly to do with the inability of the steel that was used to absorb turbulence due to the wind. And they learned a lot. The bridge was eventually redesigned and remade and reopened in 1950, 10 years later. But it was a big, I mean, it's 2,800 foot main span, so it was not a small bridge.
Yeah.
Julia will remember when they had the 50th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes.
Did you walk across the bridge with that horde?
No, I had 10 house guests.
hundreds of thousands of people who walked across the bridge and flattened the thing out. Suddenly the engineers are worried, like maybe this thing was not such a good idea.
It wasn't built to hold that weight, and especially in the center.
Okay, let's press on here. We're almost an hour and 48 minutes. We are an hour and 48 minutes into the show. We got what's that, Julia?
Good heavens, this is supposed to be a short show.
Yeah, a short show due to my voice. There was harmonic resonance at certain wind speeds, didn't solve the eigenvalues properly. Happy birthday, Clark, 55. I don't know what that means. Clark Chapin's birthday? YouTube it. Okay, the bridge had an unfortunate arrow cross section. Okay, I think we've covered that bridge. I think we should also just update you on the transaction. Jacques Vabre. We told you last Tuesday the thing had started, but they'd kept the IMOCAs in port, and then they also sent the 40s and the 50s into where they go, and they went back into France around the corner because of the awful weather that came across the North Atlantic. And the only boats that kept going were the L teams because they were ahead of that weather system, or sort of ahead of it. And the other boats, the 40s and 50s, went into Lorient and stayed there. They didn't relaunch. They didn't restart till yesterday morning. And the IMOCAs didn't restart until this morning.
I didn't.
So that's what's been going on. Those of you who are following the race, it's they've shortened the race. You're not going to go do all those loop-de-doops down there around the Ascensions and so on. They're just going to go straight to Martinique. I'm not even sure if they're doing that turning mark at Sal, but they are now underway. This was the Class 40 and the Ocean 50s back in full race mode yesterday after they docked into Lorient, and we're waiting. Julie, you want to read that?
Some 8 days after the initial start from Le Havre, a week past Sunday, 46 duos aboard their Class 40 and Ocean 50 multi-hulls returned to the Transac Jacques Fabre racecourse from Lorient this morning, heading toward Martinique. The pair set off fairly typically late autumn weather with 2.5 meter high waves and a 20 knot west-southwesterly wind. The breeze was peppered with many squalls to deal with, some bringing heavy rain and gusts of 35 to 40 knots, and a leisurely stroll.
Indeed. So what else? The IMOCAs, they kept in port, and they sat there for all week. You know, they were supposed to start Sunday, and they didn't start until today. So what's that? 7, 8, 9 days later. And here's what it looked like this morning. And I've seen some other pictures. It was woolly. It was really... Hamish, you want to read that? Can you read that?
Options. The IMOCA leaders pondered their choices after a great start. After a spectacular start at 09:30 local time off Le Havre this morning, the IMOCA fleets on the 16th Transat Jacques Vabre Normandie Le Havre made most of the outgoing tide to boost them on their way out on the way of the channel, tacking upwind past the tip of the Cherbourg Peninsula this afternoon in gustily westerly breezes in excess of 20 knots.
Well
Doesn't
done.
sound like classic sailing to me.
No, it was pretty, as I said, it was pretty woolly. In fact, we have a video to show you.
All right.
Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
The 40 competitors in the IMOCA class put on a superb show in the Bay of Seine on Tuesday morning. In choppy seas with winds of over 20 knots, the monohulls set sail, but not without trepidation.
I'm nervous this morning.
Why?
Yeah. Because I always get nervous. I think this is the 24th or 25th time I've sailed across the Atlantic. I'm nervous every time. I think it's normal because there's a lot of ocean ahead of us and anything could happen.
Ahead of them are 3,750 nautical miles or 7,000 kilometres. The modified course is almost a direct line with a course mark at the island of Santa Maria in the Azores. But the sailors face two options after the Bay of Biscay: try to head north, which is faster on paper, or head south to catch the trade winds. The decision tomorrow will be a gamble, and we have to decide on the basis of a 15-day weather forecast. We'll take whatever route's best, northerly or southerly, and if it's cold, then we'll be cold. Clearly, you're going to have to choose sides at some point. It was a difficult night for the Ocean 50s. While Primonial was leading the fleet, they reported damage to their port hull. Le Rire Médecin dismasted off the Spanish coast, and Coesio is also damaged. The pulpit has been ripped off and she's leaking. All crews, though, are okay. In the all-team category, Banque Populaire is still at the top of the rankings, and its rivals are chomping at the bit to catch up. For 2 days, it's been a race of speed. It's close with Francois and Tom. They're going very fast, so we have to keep up the pressure. The regatta's tight in the Class 40s too. The top 5 are within 5 nautical miles of each other. At 1300 this afternoon, they were led by Ambrogio Beccaria and Nicolas Andreu.
Well, they're doing those reports both in French and English and getting them out pretty quickly each day. So that's
they're very well done too.
They are well done. That's some serious damage, Gordon Smith is saying. So we'll follow that, and I still think the odds-on favorites to win in at least in the all teams and in the IMOCAs, we'll watch them, and I think that's still the case. Hamish, anything else to wrap up? Because otherwise we'll wrap this show up. You can welcome to stay if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to I'd like to acknowledge the birthday a week or two ago of Prize, a yacht that's a mainstay of our fleet in Auckland. It was a boat that was built obviously in 1923 and has been owned by one family since the war, the Thompson family. And Chad was one of the co-founders of the Classic Yacht Association, along with a couple of other friends of ours. And I just like to sort of say it's fantastic that Prize has reached that magic 100 years old. And she was named Prize after a ship in the First World War, which was a Q ship. Q ships were developed by the Royal Navy to be a target for U-boats, but they were heavily armed, but made to look like a commercial vessel. And the U-boats had a tactic in the First World War of shelling their victims as opposed to just torpedoing them. and they used to lure the U-boats in, and then they'd drop all their false sides and then start their gunnery against the U-boats. So she was named prize because this particular ship was a German ship originally, but was the very first prize to be taken during the First World War. And she was taken in, became a Q ship, and on board was a New Zealand captain. He was a temporary Lieutenant Saunders, and he won the Victoria Cross, unfortunately lost his life shortly afterwards. And Saunders is a name given to a very famous trophy in New Zealand sailing called the Saunders Cup, and it's still continued to be raced for today. But anyway, the Endine family that built Prize took up the name Prize from the exploits of Saunders, and Prize continues to sail and commemorate the events today in Auckland.
Yeah, and that's Richard Endine and what?
Yes, same family.
And what's the son who's I think sailing with ETNZ, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same, all part of the same family, and it was their boat originally, and it's been in the Thompson family, as I say, since the early 40s, and a great thing I'd like to sort of make a mention of, and a significant event in classic sailing in New Zealand. So, good old Prize.
Nice stuff. Much appreciated, including your whole segment on classic sailing, which we got beyond classic sailing in New Zealand. I think we really covered. Stingray saying, thanks for all the classic yacht history, Hamish, and for blessing us, Fozy, as a guest today.
Indeed.
What apparently is Clark Chapin's birthday. I didn't know that, Julia.
I didn't either.
Maybe I'll see Clark since I'm going to Michigan this weekend.
Oh, good.
And that gets us to Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Just a couple of submissions, quick ones. They're all clean, Julia.
Okay.
See that one? Why, thank you, young man. I'd completely forgotten to get baby carrots.
Oh.
Martha Peterson sent that in. And Ted Ryman sent this one in, apropos what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago. Well, this is awkward. Huh? You like that, Hamish? As they started to figure out Copernicus and Galileo and the rest of those guys that maybe these other planets were round and, oh, maybe we're not so flat after all. We got to go somehow convince the church that we're not. It's a heliocentric solar system, not a. What's the other word, Hamish? Meaning Earth-centric? Heliocentric is sun-centric. What's the word for being the Earth being at the center of the universe? Oh, come on, you guys. Somebody will come up with that. Probably David James will come up with that. So that's, that was a Ryman. He sent that in. One more. And this my beloved mother sent, a self-centered fog machine. This one my mother sent in. Well, now that we've learned to talk, aren't you going to admit that you were wrong? Huh? Julia?
There was another one, similar one, with that same kind of message, with the little frog chasing the big frog who was going onto land, and the little frog says, "And I'm not finished."
I'm not finished either. All my voice is thank you to my mother, the beloved Janice Davis, who is not 100%. So this weekend, we're the siblings, my brothers and sisters, we're all going to gather for an early Thanksgiving in Michigan. So we're not going to do a show on Friday. I'm sorry to report, because that's a travel day here. Couldn't go Thursday. And we'd like to ask you, Julia, as usual.
Yes, please like, follow, and share. Spreads the good news and helps us.
Even in replay. And Sailing Illustrated, of course, is viewer-supported media. We appreciate your support. Patreon.com/join/Sailing Illustrated. If you give us a few bucks a month. Thank you to all those who gave us images, video, and audio for today's show. Final thoughts, Hamish?
Well, sail well, everybody. I know it's winter in your hemisphere, but it's summer in ours, and we're really looking forward to it. So thank you very much for your time, Tom and Julia. Been fun as always, and best wishes and fair winds to all the Fozies.
Julia, your final thoughts?
I just have to thank David James for remembering geocentric.
Geocentric.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it is.
Huh? Did I tell you that he would come up with
He
it?
would. I know.
David James. And you know, Hamish, where David James went to school?
Yes.
He also went to Stanford. So he and Julia, you know, we always call them the two smartest people around. A lot of smart fuzzy on here. Hamish, thanks very much. Julia, thanks very much. And we will go see my beloved mother in Michigan. So Friday's a day off for us, an early Thanksgiving in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great picture.
With my mother, my beloved mother, who's not 100%. And we're going to gather the clan and have an early Thanksgiving this coming weekend. So in the meantime, we'll see you, however, next Tuesday, come hell or high water. Presumably I'll have my voice in better shape then, and we hope to see you then. In the meantime, have a great rest of your week and weekend. Thank you, Hamish. We'll see you later. Thank you, Julia. And sail fast, sail safe, and have fun. Ciao for now.